What if searching for your art style the traditional way is actually holding you back? For years, I felt so stuck. I would spend ages drawing, waiting for a style that never seemed to show up, until I discovered that there's actually a shortcut that most artists never talk about. So in this video, I'm going to share what I wish I had known so much sooner. Whether it's a mistake to actually work in multiple styles, my simple 5-step process to uncovering your own style, and the honest truths that helped me double my art sales. So why do some artists become famous and well-known, while others you see once and then never again? In a movie, there are extras and there are main characters. Extras fill the background. They blend in. They're an important part of the movie, but you probably wouldn't recognize or remember them, and it wouldn't really matter if it was that specific actor or another one. But if you think about the main character, someone like Jim Carrey, he's crazy, right? His expressions, his sense of humor, there is no confusing Jim Carrey with anyone else, even other famous comedians. And your art works the same way. If your illustration style looks like everyone else's, you're gonna fade into the background. You're gonna be just another extra. But if you develop a look or approach that's unmistakably yours, you become the Jim Carrey of your field. Memorable, sought after, and more likely to get those main character opportunities. Now, in a minute, I'll show you how to go from background actor to main character. But first, I know some of you, like I would be, are worrying, I don't want to be stuck with one style. What if I get bored? I want to try something new. And that is a totally legit fear. Nobody wants to feel boxed in. But having a unique or strong style doesn't mean that you are trapped to just that. Look, let's look at another actor, Bryan Cranston. For years, he was known for playing the goofy dad on Malcolm in the Middle.
I just love you boys so much. Who wants a hug?
But then he completely flipped the script with Breaking Bad and transformed into this intense, scary Walter White. He didn't lose opportunities by having a strong style. He absolutely evolved. He did something new. But how do you do this as an artist? Well, let's talk about Teagan White, for example, who I think uses the most ingenious solution to work in multiple styles. Teagan creates these amazing detailed drawings of wildlife and death and the darker side of nature. Teagan also creates these adorable woodland creatures for children's products. As you can imagine, people who are interested in cute children's art might be pretty not happy to see art of dead animals. But here's the clever part. Teagan keeps these worlds separate. The cute children's art lives under a different brand, Tiny Moth Studios, while the darker, more gothic work stays under the Teagan White name. This way, each audience gets exactly what they want, and Teagan gets to explore multiple styles without turning off clients and buyers. So if you want to try out different styles, you can consider creating separate brands or portfolios. You don't have to just pick one lane, you just need to be clear about what character you are playing for each audience. But what if you don't even have a style, let alone two? How do you even find your style in the first place? The common advice that you hear is just keep making art and your style is eventually going to appear. But let's be real, that is very vague, generic, and honestly, it's exhausting. It's like being told to dig for treasure without a map or even knowing what the treasure looks like. Here's the good news. You do not have to wait for your style to magically emerge. You can actually build it on purpose, way faster, way less frustrating, honestly, a lot more enjoyable. You actually end up with a style that you like. Look, style is just the sum of all the micro choices that you make when you're creating art. And these choices can be broken down into 5 main categories, which I call the scope framework. First, we start with shapes. Why shapes? Well, think about it like decorating a room. The architecture or shape of the room that you are in determines where you put everything. For example, I'm in an attic with this sloping wall. I can't put a picture on that wall. Well, I could, but not very effectively. In your art, the shapes that you draw and how you arrange them are your architecture. They influence every other part of your style. It's all about how you choose to represent what you see. Let's look at some examples. On one end of the spectrum, I've got Mona Lisa, super realistic, every shape is carefully rendered. And on the other, Charlie Brown is literally just dots and half circles, but instantly recognizable. And my own style falls somewhere in between these two. Even something as simple as an eye can be drawn as a dot in a smiley face, or you can add outlines and lashes and pupils for more detail. Every choice that you make changes the feeling of your art. No version is better than the other. Let's break down two main approaches to shape: geometric and organic. My students tell me that this is a game changer. It opens up a whole new fun way of making art. Geometric shapes are things like circles, cubes, triangles. They're very precise and structured. They often feel artificial or man-made because most things in nature aren't perfectly geometric, while organic shapes are much more fluid and imperfect. Here's an illustrated example. These mushrooms are very geometric style. Everything is clean, sharp, made into perfect shapes. Half circle for the mushroom caps. Even the triangles in here are cut into perfect shapes. The shading is crisp, while these mushrooms are much more organic. The edges are uneven, the shading is rough, and the lines are loose and flowing. And finally, I made this third one, which is somewhere in between. Some organic shapes, but not quite so stiff as the first one. Once you've figured out the shapes, your room's architecture, it's time to pick out the paint. Color is where your style really starts to show its personality. Let's talk about how the colors you choose can make your art instantly recognizable. The most obvious example is to reuse a color palette over and over again across multiple pieces. But also, the way that you apply color can also create a unique style. For example, Joey Chu does this really nice thing where he doesn't leave things the same color. So in the ocean, you can see that we go from these teals to a blue. He's not using a light to dark blue, it's a mix of colors altogether. You can see the same in the ground right here. It's a gradation of different hues of orange and yellow and red. Now, color isn't the only way to make your art stand out. The next big ingredient in your style is the objects that you actually choose to draw, your unique subject matter. This is where your personal interests, quirks, obsessions, all of that come into play. You could give 10 artists the same color palette and shapes, but what they decide to draw will make each piece completely different. Your unique subject matter could be literal, as in Teagan White is known for drawing animals, but you don't have to be stuck drawing the exact same things over and over. Your unique subject matter could be the mood or attitude or themes that you're drawn to. Take Chris, for example. He draws all kinds of things, but what really sets his work apart is his playful sense of humor. Each piece feels fun, funky, and a little bit cheeky. That overarching theme ties everything together, no matter what the actual subject matter is. So try writing a list of things that you love drawing most, or the moods or themes that you naturally bring to your art. These are clues to your unique subject matter, and they're really the key to making art that feels authentic and exciting to you. Now that you've added the shapes and color, it's time to think about how the whole room fits together in space. This is where perspective and form come in. Form is what makes your art feel three-dimensional instead of flat, like stepping into a real room instead of looking at a floor plan. Let's look at some examples. Maurice Sendak uses cross-hatching, which is lines that are crisscrossed together. When the lines are spaced further apart, it looks lighter, versus when they're crisscrossed closer together, it looks darker. Another style is by using just solid blocks of color and contrast. This illustration by Sarah Beth Morgan is a great example. So we can see the hat has a dark and a light color here. The fact that the lower part is darker helps create the shade, but also the shape, the way that it curls around, also helps the hat look round. And my go-to style is a gradient, where the color gradually changes from lighter to darker. So you can see I did this right here, where this is lighter and it gets darker as the horn, the party horn, curls around. So this area is darker. Now that you've figured out the architect and shapes and you've picked out colors, there's another detail that brings the whole room together: the edging or the line work. Lines are like the trim or the molding, so like the door frame here, right? They add an outline, add character to everything that you create. So what are the different ways that we can use line work to sculpt our style? Line work can either be an outline of a shape, or it can be the details inside of shapes. Sometimes the entire piece is made up of line work, like this tattoo work by artist Susa of Suflanda. Contour lines are the outer lines that we use to define a shape. You've seen these in comics.
Personally, I use line as an outline sparingly, instead relying on solid shapes and colors to separate elements. So for example, in the bread right here, I'm not using line work and outline to create separation between the background and the bread. But I am using a line right here to separate each loaf of bread from each other. I use line when some extra definition is needed to define a shape or to separate from other background elements.
It's not just where you put your lines, it's how you draw them that impacts your style.
In nature, sharp, acute lines cause us pain. They're often like thorns or a sharp piece of glass. So sharp, harsh, jagged lines can create a more dangerous or edgy or sinister feeling. So for example, in this piece by Edward Gorey, these branches are rather sharp. They kind of are pointy and kind of grabbing at the man here. So that is a great example of sharp, edgy lines, whereas smooth lines can feel fluid and safe. These are lines that are often used to communicate something that's cute. So for example, in this piece by Joey Chu, you can see that these lines are very calm and serene.
Now, of all of these elements, color is probably the most important make or break one. So check out this video next to learn what I wish someone had told me about color sooner.